Hello, and welcome to Nintendo Obscura, where we take a look into the abstract, the unknown, and the quintessential hidden gems of the 8-bit library. My name is Brandon, and I will be your tour guide. Today, we are looking into not a ROM hack or an old game, but a recently developed Kickstarter starlet forged in the trenches of synthwave, known only as Street Cleaner, the video game. Roll tape. Yet another Kickstarter pixelated retro darling has come through the chute, this time conceptualized by synthwave producer Street Cleaner, along with indie developers Creaky Lantern. I heard about this game's development from friends who are in the local synthwave troupe Turbo Drive here in San Francisco. They threw monthly events before the lockdown, bringing synthwave artists from all around the world to our humble city, cultivating a local retrowave fandom in its wake. They've had shows at many venues around the city, but hold a homestead at the legacy venue, DNA Lounge. They still do monthly livestream events outside of DNA to keep the torch burning. Street Cleaner is one of the synthwave protagonists that's been a part of the modern resurgence of the 80s retrowave renaissance, and has played Turbo Drive more than a few times. After producing a few albums, he has broadened media horizons into the indie video game territory. In tandem with Creaky Lantern, they have developed a brand new 8-bit style pixelated game called Street Cleaner, the video game, which is another awesome modernized callback to NES-style games of yesteryear. This type of game fits perfectly alongside the synthwave genre as it further emulates the 80s era of technology and culture. However, Street Cleaner the video game is much more than just a nostalgic gimmick, as it is a tight-knit, well-crafted game that is evocative of the original Nintendo vibes, while also having many elements that give it its own unique flair that separates it from other games of the era. You play as the titular street cleaner Jack Slade, a mysterious 80s protag that traverses the city of San Diego on a mission to wipe out the criminal scum underworld that has taken over the streets. Equipped with nothing but his gun, a baseball bat, a sleek eggshell white motorcycle, and the conviction to save his city. This game implements stylized 8-bit retro aesthetics, combined with modernized graphical elements, like parallax scrolling backgrounds, dynamic pixel animations, and particle effects, which in turn elevate it from the original Nintendo's limitations. Certain elements off the bat give me Castlevania vibes, which is a welcome addition for me, like the slight delay in the swinging of the bat similar to Simon's delayed whip animation, forcing the player to time their attack a split second early and anticipate enemies' trajectory of attacks. This game also gives me Ninja Gaiden vibes in some areas, as the enemies can be very quick and you have to track their movements appropriately. Jack Slade moves at a slower pace, similar to Simon Belmont, but has heavy attacks to utilize. One mechanic that separates Jack from Simon is the dropkick attack, which can be used to smash enemies from above and give you a quick bounce off them. Once you get good at the dropkick, the game becomes a whole new beast, and can be very effective against bosses. Jack also has a handgun for range attacks with a finite amount of bullets that you can replenish to use incrementally with his melee attacks. Learning to use these three attack patterns properly can transform you into a street cleaning juggernaut. Another modernized mechanic that seems to have been added is many enemies and bosses don't have repetitive attack patterns, unlike their retro counterparts. They seem to change up their advances based on player movement, which is simply an awesome addition in my opinion. Every time you play, you have to keep on your toes, as each time will require you to think on the fly to respond to new enemy engagements. Especially the bosses, I've noticed, seem to mix up their attack patterns based on the geography of where the player is compared to the enemy. This almost gives me a Dark Souls vibe, as each boss fight can and will be different, and you have to react at a moment's notice. One more savvy aspect that evokes slight Bloodborne / Dark Souls premonitions for me is a parry mechanic that seems to have been added as well, apparently. If you strike an enemy, boss, or projectile right as it connects with your attack animation, it will actually nullify the damage, as does the enemy's damage sprite animation will nullify the hit upon contact. Using parries along with your gun, bat, and drop kicks can carve out new victories against this challenging game. These type of modernized gameplay facets mixed with retro-style 8-bit aesthetics and design creates an unprecedented work of art in my opinion. One of the coolest proponents of this game, I forgot to mention, is that there are dogs randomly throughout. And yes, you can pet the dog. That seems to be a metric of value in quantifying a game's quality these days. Anytime a dog pops up, it's commonly asked in gamer culture, yes, but can you pet them? And Street Cleaner passes the pet the puppy dog test, let me tell you. Not only that, but petting the dog actually replenishes your HP, so it has real utility outside of just being adorable. I first streamed this game on Twitch when it was released. I have a very humble follower count to say the least, but that day, surprisingly, both Street Cleaner himself and the devs of Creaky Lantern popped in the chat. I was elated. I was also nervous, and I kept taking hits as I felt the pressure from them watching, and the game itself was relatively challenging, as well as my Bluetooth controller cutting out during a boss fight, so that made for one good excuse. I also think I referred to Street Cleaner as Street Sweeper in the chat, so that was a trifecta of embarrassment, but good times were had nonetheless. Devin Dossett of DNA Lounge / Turbo Drive is also the second boss when you get to the nightclub level. Not to mention more cameos by Protector 101, Kogex, a hidden cameo by Danny DeLorean, of which I have yet to find, as well as other synthwave aficionados of the scene. This game is a love letter to both synthwave and the best of the 8-bit era of gaming. Just recently, I got to have a chat with Brooks, one of the developers behind Street Cleaner, and got to pick his brain to see the inspirations and development behind the game. I first asked what retro games inspired the aesthetics and mechanics of Street Cleaner. He replied, "The first thing that really kinda kicked us off was the Sunsoft Batman NES game. That combined with Shatterhand inspired the visual aesthetics and starting point for the mechanics. From there we kind of listed out the big names, and started picking at them to fill out where we wanted the game to go mechanically, so Ninja Gaiden, Castlevania, and Mega Man. I've got a big personal attachment to Castlevania 3, and the lore of the Street Cleaner is that he uses a baseball bat called the Manhandler, which is a real bat. It shows up in the album art and photos. So the whip delay thing combined with the baseball bat just made sense to me, thematically and mechanically. That was quite an experience getting that to work though. It took a lot of iteration to get it how it feels today in the released version. We felt like the bat requiring timing is balanced by the fact that the gun is a superior weapon, with range / immediacy but limited ammunition, and makes the dive kick out to be an even better option in a lot of situations. I can totally see some Castlevania 3 vibes, especially in the nightclub fight. What was your idea behind that? The Turbo Drive fight to me is more of a take on the Trio Shade fight in Symphony of the Night, which I really love for how interesting it is combining theme and mechanics to make a memorable fight. I actually recognize Protector 101 as one of the characters in that fight, but who are the other two? The whip guy is Kogex, and the club fight needed a Grant character, so I invented Olivia Ninja John to fill that role. Her outfit is based off the Livin' in Desperate Times video. Haha, wow, I can totally see that now. To elaborate a little more on the inspiration side, while we definitely took a lot from the NES classics, there's quite a bit of modern inspiration. Shovel Knight and Curse of the Moon, of course, proving that there's a huge market for 8-bit throwbacks using modern mechanics, and Celeste being such a game changer for its approach to accessibility left a huge impression on us that made its way in. Before this was actually a game, it was more of me kind of riffing on a joke idea I had. Since the Street Cleaner music project was always the idea of soundtrack to an 80s summer blockbuster movie that never existed, I joked, yeah, and they totally would have sold the game rights to LJN to make a quick buck. LOL, you mean LJN the game publisher? Yeah, since they had every movie right under the sun and just totally ruined them all. Going back to the game's concept. So I was working on kind of an interactive music video that would have been one song and you would just walk around and do stuff while it played. Eventually we decided to take it to the next level and just do a full game, and Jesse would go back to his video game music roots and do the soundtrack for real. So since a big goal of the game's project was to make it a vehicle for the Street Cleaner music, we decided to make it something basically anyone could pick up and play, hence the accessibility focus. Are there any modern inspirations that went into Street Cleaner? So I don't know if you've checked out my other game yet, Aeternum. There was this other project idea I've had for a while that was kind of a long-term thing. So to practice game development and build up some experience, I somehow settled on making a bullet hell game, which if you take a look at it, you can see it's totally just trying to be a Toho project game in everything but name and characters. So having gone through that experience, there's a whole lot of shmup / bullet hell design ethos in the bosses. You know, I could totally see that now that you mention it. Especially with the pink ninja boss, the woman at the fountain boss, and the witch. A lot of bullet hell / projectile dodging. I've always felt boss fights are one of the weaker areas of even those NES classics. So part of the modernization was I really wanted to make interesting multi-phase boss fights. It crept in more so towards the end of development, in the mansion and final bosses, where I was a bit more pressured and kind of fell back towards what I already knew. I think it worked out though. I also got to chat a bit with Jesse himself, also known as Street Cleaner, about his inspirations behind the development of the game. I talked to Brooks a bit about the design philosophy and mechanics from his perspective. I was curious what inspired you to make an 8-bit game, being a synthwave producer. Brooks has been a part of Street Cleaner since day one. We always talk about deep lore and stuff. Brooks came up with the idea of a game based off the Street Cleaner film the same way the first albums were. What would a game look like if a game were made in 1988 based off an action film? That was pretty much the template. I see. That's pretty cool. The 8-bit aesthetics and playstyle super fits with your music, by the way. Thanks, dude. It was a fun project. Writing an NES soundtrack was a bit of a risk, but it paid off. Yeah, I was just gonna ask about that. You made the chiptune soundtrack as well, yes? That's kind of an offshoot of your normal synthwave stuff, but it sounds great. Yeah, I wrote the music in NSF. All of the tracks can be played on NES hardware. Spoken like a true chiptune purist. I think it's really cool this range between guttural chunky synthwave and slick 8-bit chiptune made for proper hardware. So those are my short interviews via Discord with developer Brooks from Creaky Lantern and Jesse the Street Cleaner. I'd like to thank them both for taking the time to indulge a nerd like myself about the inner workings of 8-bit design. Thanks again for joining me on another excursion into the Pixel Abyss. Until next time, have a pleasant evening. Or morning, or afternoon, or whenever you happen to be watching this. Thanks.